I would like to welcome everybody back to the second half of this morning's webinar. This is the Sage 100 Year-End Tips and Tricks, and this portion is the payroll-specific year-end closing section. Again, if you were not in attendance in the first portion and you are just now joining us, if you would like to get CPE credit, please contact Shannon Barnhart. Her email address is listed there on the slides, and note in your subject line that you would like to receive CPE credit, and make note of what portion of today's session that you have attended. The agenda for the second half today, we're going to cover some miscellaneous information. Again, for those of you who were in the first portion, this will be a little bit of a repeat, but in order to catch the folks up who are just now joining us, I want to go back through the information again. Excuse me. We will talk about the payroll module. We'll talk about doing our year-end processing, and then we'll finish up with talking about processing payroll forms through the Aatrix software. Again, for the folks who are just now joining us, DWD Technology Group, we're a division of Doolin Ward DeWald CPAs. We have offices located in the northeast part of Indiana, Fort Wayne, Marion, and Indy, central part of the state, but we also cover multi-state area. We've got clients that are basically all across the country. We currently have 10 software consultants, many of whom are on our Sage 100 team. We've got 11 network engineers who can be available to help you with your internal IT needs as well. Some of the software services, we offer training and support. We will help you implement new software. We'll help you with your upgrades and any customizations, as we've got a master developer on staff. We can do custom report writing. We can offer data conversion services, barcoding, web integration, and then also Sage CRM, which is a newer product to our family that we find integrating very well with Sage 100. For 2013 was the last year that Sage maintained 1099 forms and W-2 forms in its own software. Since then, they have teamed up with a company called Aatrix, and they have integrated with a process that facilitates state and federal e-filing and reporting. Now, even though it says e-filing and reporting, you are not forced into e-filing unless you have the requisite number of employees, and I believe federal e-filing requirements are for 250 employees present or past for the year. Indiana, it is 25 employees, and you need to do some of your tax forms via e-filing. If you utilize the e-filing functionality, you will have extra charges, and those are payable through Aatrix. You would basically need to register an account with Aatrix and identify what forms you will need to e-file, and they'll set up the charges to you as you process the forms. As far as the versions that are supported, we are looking at the current version, which is 2017, and 3 prior versions. So Sage is officially supporting version 2014 and newer. You'll note that phone support from Sage will expire in September of 2017. You'll notice that software updates, we're looking at the very last ones that we can get for 2014 as far as an IRD and as far as tax tables, and then 2014 will lop off at the end of this year. 2015 obviously will lop off at the end of next year, and so on. For payroll, things that you really want to consider doing, especially at the year end, make a copy of your company. It's not required anymore as far as printing the forms. Back in the day, a few years back, in order to continue processing payroll into the new year, but yet you're not ready to do your W-2s yet, you had to leave an historical copy of your company. Theoretically, that requirement does not stand anymore, but what we encourage you to do is to still make that backup. You can run your W-2s out of that backup. There is no problem with that. But just to have that as an archive for you. One thing I didn't mention before I got started here, we've got the lines muted for everybody because there are so many people in attendance. If you've got questions, please type through the chat box. David Overholt is moderating with me today, and he will try to answer questions as we go. If it is a big important one that he wants to make sure that everybody hears at the time, he's going to let me know and we'll talk about it. Otherwise, we'll take questions closer to the end of the session this morning. So again, back to the payroll, make your backups prior to closing your quarter. And you'll notice that payroll is a little bit different than your other modules. Your other modules typically are set up by months. Payroll is actually set up by quarters. So first quarter, January through March, second quarter, April through June, and so on. And in order to run the new ACA reporting, you need to have your perpetual history option enabled. If you don't have it enabled and you need to facilitate the ACA reporting, you may have to backfill some information. Otherwise, the perpetual history will have been keeping track of some things for you and will help you facilitate the ACA reporting for this year. When it comes time to a quarter close, I get this question pretty religiously. You have to be in the current quarter for whatever your check date is. So if we're looking at this year, December 31st is actually a Saturday, I think. We want to make sure that when you need to run checks for the first week of January, you have to have your payroll closed into 2017 quarter one, or you will not be able to update your checks. So again, make that backup, then you can go ahead and close and you can be prepared for processing payroll into the new quarter. And then as I had mentioned earlier, the Aatrix reporting, the newer federal and state e-filing and reporting functions actually can refer you to prior periods, so we're not locked in like we used to be. For those of you who've been around the Sage product for a number of years, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. If you're fairly new, no big deal. Just go ahead and rock and roll, and we can get our reporting out of either a live company or an historical company. What happens when we close payroll, especially at year end? Some of this is similar for the quarter closings, but what's really important here is your year-end processing. Your check history file could be purged if you were not maintaining your perpetual history. That can be a problem if you need to go back and look at things. Again, that's why I really encourage everybody to make that annual archival backup before you start the new year. And you want to do that before you close. However, if you do have your perpetual history enabled, then you'll clear that check history file manually if you ever need to make some of that information go away. Employee benefits get reset. Okay, so regardless of whether your company operates on a fiscal year or not, payroll is always calendar year based. So if we're looking at our 401k deductions or anything else that you might have some sort of annual limit, those things will reset at the beginning of the year. We'll also notice that year-to-date and quarter-to-date earnings and deductions get reset. So as you're processing through the quarters, obviously each quarter will reset, when you do your year-end, both quarter and year-to-dates will get reset. Your taxes will get reset. And then if you have any terminated employees, those typically will get purged. However, there is a new option in payroll, and I'm going to go buzz over real quick and show that to you, that you can actually hold on to terminated employee information. This is a fairly new feature, but based on the number of years to retain e-filing check history, this actually will also hold terminated employees for that same length of time. I know I have a few clients that have some special reports that look at the employee maintenance file for static information, and in the past, as those employees would come and go, that information would get purged, and then when they would go run a report a year or two down the road, they wouldn't see everything that they expected to see because the employee static information no longer existed. So keep that in the back of your mind. We aren't limited to just the 1 year anymore. We can make that a little bit longer, but again, realize that you've got terminated employees in your live employee listing now too. So there's a little trade-off to be aware of. As far as printing your tax forms, your W-2s, your 941s, any of your state reporting that you might need to do, in Indiana, your UC-1s, you can even do your WH-1s. In order to utilize this Aatrix function, you do need to be on version 2014 or higher, which in order to be able to have any updates, you have to be on version 2014 or higher. And the utility called the Federal and State E-Filing and Reporting, that is its own separate program. Even though it shows up on everybody's menu, unless it is physically installed on a specific computer, then you'll get a note that says, this hasn't been installed, do you want to install it now? Otherwise, the computer from where these forms are going to be generated needs to have this program separately installed. You also need to be current on your Sage 100 maintenance, and this is actually your payroll subscription now, as Sage is going through its metamorphosis with how it's handling its maintenance. For those of you on payroll, you would have started anytime as early as maybe April of this year rolling over to the new Sage subscription plan for payroll. And as we're moving forward, we're seeing a lot of people making that migration for their regular maintenance to go onto the Sage 100C subscription plan for accessing the software. So need to have your maintenance current, need to be on an appropriate version of the software in order for any of this to be viable. Some of the forms that we can do, like I mentioned, we can do the 941, we can do our W-2s, we can do our annual 940, whatever is appropriate for your unemployment. And most of these forms can be done without pre-printed forms, especially the W-2s. And I'll talk about what documents you might need. The 941s are not pre-printed. You just go ahead and print that to plain paper. The Form 940, print that to plain paper. You can do e-filing, again, depending on the number of employees. The charges vary. There's a base amount and then some amount per employee once you get past that minimum. If you want to do the e-filing, and that's paid separately to Aatrix. On your W-2s, okay, we've got our federal copy, the copy A. It used to be red, for those folks who remember that, and the W-3 that also used to be red. That was your summary sheet. Those are no longer required to be red forms, and in fact, you may just simply use plain paper to generate those documents. For your employees, the recommendation is a blank 4-part perforated piece of paper. One side will be blank, and that's where all of the employee information will go. We recommend that the other side have the instructions pre-printed. Otherwise, you'll need to physically print instruction sheets and remit those along with the W-2s to your employees. You are required to provide instructions for those forms. So I don't recommend just printing it all off on blank paper and saying, here you go. At a minimum, they do have to get an instruction sheet. For the state in general, we can do our UC1, our UC5A forms on plain paper. We can do our WH1 and our WH3 at the end of the year. We can do that on plain paper. And if you want to e-file, you can. Again, there's a schedule of costs depending on how many employees and whether or not you're doing federal and or state form filing. In Indiana, make note, 25 or more employee returns must be e-filed with state. I have heard dirty rumors that a couple people are not getting yelled at yet. I don't expect that to last very much longer. So if you're right around that threshold, it probably would behoove you to just go ahead and e-file. As far as updates, there is not only the Aatrix updates, but we've got an interim release document, or interim release IRD, that we expect to be coming out. I thought it was going to be this week, but it might be either later this week or into next week. I checked this morning and I had not seen that come out yet. And as soon as we know about it, we'll try to let you folks know so that we can get those things updated. So if you intend on generating your own payroll forms for tax return purposes, we'll try and work with you and get the updates out there with you so that we can get things taken care of. Now, Aatrix itself has its own additional updates, predominantly to update the forms as far as what you see when you physically print. And what happens as we run through the Aatrix federal and state e-filing, some things are going to happen. And I'm actually going to bounce over to the software here to talk a little bit about the next few slides that I have. But if I get into my payroll and I get into my period end, I'm going to notice my options for my federal and state e-filing and reporting. And to kind of correlate with some of the slides I've got here, first thing that it will do is it's going to verify that you have an active business care plan. And if you don't, you will be able to continue, but the only thing that you'll get will be demo watermark forms. So none of this would be submittable. And in this case today, I'm not getting greeted with the typical Aatrix update. And one of the slides here, let me pop back over to it quickly. It is very likely that you will get a forms update screen, and it'll have these 4 buttons for automatic update, download and update, continue expired, or just cancel. I always recommend just hit the automatic update and follow the bouncing prompts. It will walk you through the various form updates that have been deployed, and I just recommend take everything, even though you might only be Indiana or Ohio or wherever. Just take everything because it's safer to grab everything than to pick and choose and not get what you need. Once you get past that, then you can get back in and you get your options for your federal and state forms. And you'll notice some of these years out here still refer back to the 2015, or if this is a brand new install of the Aatrix, they might even be earlier. Don't get too excited about it. It is appropriate just because you've not gotten all the updates yet. So I might want to go ahead and pull down, say, my 940 report. And it'll walk through. Okay, here's my updates. So once you pick your form, it's going to go ahead and prompt you. Follow the updates. Just go ahead and let it get downloaded and installed. And the more current that you've done this, the less that it will need to download. And do not be surprised that if you do an access today and you download a few things, even tomorrow or even later this afternoon, don't be surprised if you see that you need to do another download, because they start popping these updates out as quickly as they can this time of year, and it might be 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 of them until the end of January. So we'll go ahead and let that thing do its downloading. If you run into problems with anything as far as errors that you might get, or you're having difficulty getting it to install, there are a few tips that we recommend. You need to set up some trusted websites in your internet options, and you would do this through your Internet Explorer, because that's the interface that Sage uses for its internet interface. Make sure that you've got the appropriate website, the HTTPS sagemass.aatrix.com. As far as the privacy tab, make sure that you've got the aatrix.com and Aatrix Forms programs and the updater programs allowed. And then also make sure that your firewalls, so you might need to check with your IT folks, make sure that they can access port 80 for the Aatrix updates. I'll come back and check on my little guy here. He's still downloading. If you come across the fact that you still cannot get the programs to automatically install, you can manually download the program and you can run it. And the website I've got listed here is the aatrix.com/sagemass. That is where you can find the link for the Sage 100 program interface. Save it on your workstation and then just run it. So you want to download it from whatever workstation needs it, again, because it is computer specific, and then just go ahead and process it. Now, when you get back into it after you have finished running it, it's going to actually say, do you want to do an upgrade? Go ahead and click on the automatic update one more time. That will lock in to the software that, hey, yeah, I got my update, I'm okay, and it will let you continue. And we're still chugging along here. This is the first time I've done my download on this particular workstation for this, so it's going to take me a couple of minutes to get this to kick out. I am going to start asking if folks have some questions. Again, please type them in for the time being. David is moderating, and he can either answer the questions through the chat or he'll bring them up for the group as a whole, and we can start going over them. Because what I do want to do here is kind of walk through a couple of these forms. For those of you who may not have seen Aatrix before, I'd like to give you a little bit of a view of what to expect. And it's thinking. So when the wizard comes up, first thing it does is it confirms your federal ID number, and that information actually gets pulled from the library master company maintenance information. So whatever company name, address, and federal and state ID numbers that you have, it's going to read from there first. If you don't have that populated, I would strongly suggest that you do, and just go ahead and confirm here then that that's the correct federal ID number. You can fill in your address information, fill in any contact information. It's going to get mad at me here, so I'm going to fill in some stuff. and it will tell you what fields are required. So you notice I didn't formally fill in any of the contact information. You can if you wish. You don't have to if you don't want to. Who are you filing for? Well, I'm filing for my own company. And then we're going to notice some pieces of information here, especially if you've got state withholdings. You may or may not have appropriate tax account numbers. And so what Sage and Aatrix are doing here is they're highlighting for you, we don't think that some of these numbers are correctly formatted. So if you double click on it, it's going to recommend this is what your format should look like. So you just want to go ahead and get the number formatted correctly for your jurisdiction. And then we're going to just simply follow what I call the bouncing prompts. If you have multiple company IDs in Sage 100 through which you are processing payroll, and they all report under the same federal ID number, you may merge all of that data together into one filing. And there's a little bit of a trick to it, but it's not very difficult. You just want to make sure that as you walk through each of the companies, because you have to tell it, hey, I am a multi-data company, multi-Sage data company, that I need to gather all this information. It's the last one that you process that you'll pull in all the other ones that you started. So you'll actually walk through this in every company. You'll create a little file that gets saved off, and then when you are ready to merge them all together, you'll bring all of those other external company files together, and it will prepare one filing with you. I think the majority of you folks, though, are just a single payroll data company. Each company that you have in Sage is its own federal ID number, so you're going to report them independently. And then Sage is going to go out and read the data, do some calculations, and run it back to Aatrix in order to process the forms. Depending on how many employees you have, this may or may not take a couple of minutes. And it will give you, since I'm doing a filing form, it just basically drops me into the actual form. If I was doing W-2s, it would get us into a listing of the employees that you will go through and edit. And it looks like we've got a question out there. David, what you got, sir?
Well, somebody brought up a very good question, which is if I've already started doing my payroll data entry and then I realized that my prior quarter was not closed, what do I do?
That is an awesome question, and I do get that one pretty regularly as well. You can actually go back with your payroll data entry intact, and you can close payroll. It will roll your calendar forward accordingly, and then you may continue with the rest of your payroll processing. So you will not lose, or you should not lose, any of your payroll data entry. It will basically just leave that where it was, and I would at least recommend rerunning the payroll tax calculation and rerunning the payroll data entry audit report, especially because we're looking at benefits getting reset and things like that. So you should be fine. I have had people do this pretty frequently over the last number of years, and we've been able to close without any ill effect.
I'm mention too, though, that if you've already printed your checks,
Yes.
the year-to-date information, if this is year-end, I don't know on quarter-end if it makes any difference, but
Quarter end, I don't believe makes any difference, but the year end, yes, absolutely would make a difference. So you might need to go back. That's why I recommend going back and recalculating your payroll tax calculation.
yeah, that's true.
And then reprint your checks from there. But yeah, that's a great question, and I should have thought to address that a little bit earlier.
That's fine. I don't have any other questions at this time.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and bebop through a little bit more of the form, just to give folks a flavor, especially some of the new folks who haven't seen any of this before. And then when I get done with the form, I'll open it up for questions and see if anybody else has anything else that they want to discuss. So once we are in a particular Aatrix form, you will see some of the blue areas here on the screen. Those are areas that you may edit. If it is not blue, then you can't do any editing. Make note of any warnings or information dialog boxes that pop up. This one is talking about the credit reduction in multi-state employers and, completing specific schedules. If you see anything in red, that is going to be a field that you must fill in. So as we click through a couple of the screens, watch the instructions. We're going to go through some steps. We're going to basically do a review edit, and then we can potentially print an internal copy. Whenever we print from a My Copy, it will be watermarked, so you do not file it. And then when we get to the finality here, the federal or state copy, then that can be printed, again, to plain paper in most cases. It will not have the watermarks, and those would be things that you can actually submit to the governmental jurisdiction for whom this form is being prepared. So again, another reminder, if it's a red field, you must fill something out or else it will not allow you to continue. And you would fill out whatever the appropriate information is. Since this is the federal unemployment form, then it's just basically saying, okay, we've collected or you've tracked $1,700 worth of food attacks. Maybe by accident you actually remitted $1,720. So it will automatically calculate any underages or overages and how you want to handle, especially the overages. If you make note up here in the upper upper left-hand corner, if it's a multi-page document, then you'll get the scroll for traversing through the different pages. And again, just walk through the forms and fill them out as you would fill them out manually.
Mary?
Yes.
You may need to go back to the last page, but a comment was brought up. I'm going to read it to you because I'm not sure I understand it fully. But suggestion for Schedule A users: if you choose the due date for the federal taxes to be the same as the check date, your Schedule A will require no changes and will be auto-filled to the exact dates it needs to be.
Can you read that again for me, please?
For Schedule A, if you choose the due date for federal taxes to be the same as the check date, your Schedule A will require no changes and will be auto-filled with the exact dates it needs to be. I think what they're saying is if you make the due, when you're doing
the liability date,
make the due date the same as the check date. For example, if the due date is Friday and the print date is Tuesday, I changed the due date to be Tuesday, and now Schedule A is perfect and requires no changes at all.
Yeah, and I think and that's probably more for the 941, where we've got a couple of days grace period as far as the physical check date versus when the deposit is required. But yeah, I think that would kind of help as far as when the system, when the IRS has received your payments, and making sure that the liability due dates are all appropriate and everything kind of matches out. And if I'm not following that line of thought, please feel free to correct us.
Okay. You did follow it.
Yay! I got one right.
I'm glad you did, because I'm not the tax person.
That's yeah. You cover other things for us. But basically, as we go through the forms, I'm just basically trying to fill in wherever it is yelling at me for the specific red fields. And now I will just click on a next step. And again, it's reminding me, hey, you know, there's something that you've missed. So let's go back and check that. And I had some exemptions, so why were they exempt? You have to at least fill in a reason. If this was 0, then you wouldn't get yelled at for that particular question. If I neglect to fill in something, then it will give me a couple of chances to make sure I've got everything 150% correct. Once I agree, you'll notice my status bar moves up to the My Copy. And at this point, if I would physically print this document, it will have a watermark on it, and it will tell you do not file. You may print it from here, or what I usually recommend for folks is to just go ahead and print a couple copies of the final. You will, along the way, get prompted by Aatrix, are you sure you don't want to sign up for an unlimited e-filing package? Are you really sure? It is absolutely your prerogative whether or not you sign up for e-filing. If you are annoyed by their messages, you can shut them off. And typically what you will find on some of the forms is the option to either e-file or to physically print. And for many of my folks, printing is absolutely acceptable. And then you just tell it how many pages you want to print, make sure which printer you send it to, and you've got forms that are filled out, they look nice, and hopefully they are all accurate based on the data that it collected through the payroll processing. And once you're done, it will store the information so that we can recover it and go back and either reprint it or possibly even edit it. It'll also make note for some of the new employee reporting, where you're required to report the new employees, depending on your state law. You can either have the system prepare a report for you, or you can just go ahead and tell it that you've already done it. And once we're done with the report, we can always go back into existing reports. And the one thing that always catches me, and I have to remember this every year, even though I've clicked the button, I might click the state and see what state reports are available, or I click the federal and I see what federal are available. Existing reports doesn't come up with anything until I accept. So that's one slightly weird thing. And you notice I have to make sure I give it a federal ID number before I move on, or it will get angry. But then it will go back and give us a listing of all previously filed, processed, draft, copy forms, what status they're in, whether they're in draft mode or whether they've been e-filed or whether they've been printed, for what period, and when was the last time it was worked on. So if we have to go back in, we can continue. If we need to reprint something, we don't have to recreate the wheel. It's all right here for us. So that's another really wonderful thing about this Aatrix tool, is it gives us that history and it maintains it no matter how long you've been processing your payroll year-end forms through here. So I've got this one particular screen here for the customer portal just to remind you that you've got access to Sage's knowledge base. You are welcome to go out and visit that. You can also find the downloads for the IRD and or the tax tables. If you would like help installing them, please let us know. If you have third-party solutions, we do want to be careful because we have to be on certain service packs, and we also have to make sure that our extended solutions are on appropriate versions so that we don't break things. But because you have payroll maintenance subscriptions active, you have access to the knowledge base. You can set up authorized contacts and have them get logged in, and you can have virtually the exact same information that we and Sage have access to as far as any questions or technical support or general information. With that, I've finished with the information that I wanted to share with you this morning. I want to open up the floor for questions. And again, you're welcome to chat them. David can reiterate them, or if we need to, we can always open up a line. And if you need CPE...
I have one question. Do you have any information on ACA for this year?
I don't think anything has changed as far as the ACA reporting requirements, and the ACA functionality is built in to the federal e-filing and reporting, and that is what comprises these top two, the 1095, 1094B, and the 1095, 1094C forms. So Aatrix is keeping those forms up to date. And again, perpetual history needs to have been enabled, and hopefully has always been enabled in order for that information to accumulate. Otherwise, it's you may have to fill some of that stuff in manually in order to facilitate the reporting. Any other questions?
Don't have anything up in the question box at this time.
Okay. Just for everybody's benefit, we have recorded these sessions this morning. They'll be broken down into the first half for the core modules and the second half here for the payroll module. Look out on our website. I don't know how quickly they'll get posted, but probably within the next few days. Copies of the recordings and copies of the presentation materials will be available for you. If there were some folks who were not able to attend, feel free to download the recordings and share this with your coworkers.